Happy Friday, and welcome to this week's episode of Eye on the Tigers. I'm Delaney Barrow, joined by co-host of the week, Andrew Mesa. This weekend, Auburn football will travel to Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks, but both Auburn soccer and volleyball will have home games. So let's get into it. First up on today's agenda, we have volleyball. The Tigers traveled to Fayetteville last weekend and were swept by the Razorbacks. Andrew, this weekend the Tigers return home to host the Mizzou Tigers. What are you expecting to see out of these weekend's matches?
I'm expecting Auburn to bounce back after a couple losses last week. The Tigers will play 0-5 Missouri in SEC play, so this will be a good chance to bounce back and get a couple wins to get back and climb up the SEC ladder. A couple performances from last week. Rebecca Raff, she managed to hit 29 kills, which is the second most in Auburn history. Bella Rosenthal a few weeks ago against the Alabama game was able to hit 1,000 digs, which is I think she's 15th in Auburn Tiger history to hit that mark. And Tatum Shipes currently leads blocking per set in the SEC and is third nationally. So we have a lot of momentum riding, even though we lost 2 games against Arkansas. But Brent Crouch, the volleyball head coach, has been talking about using a toolbox method, different ways to pass the ball, to spike the ball, to blocking techniques. So I think that practice makes perfect. So I think the more they practice, the more they get in-game experience, I think the Tigers will bounce back and start to collect some more wins.
Yeah, I agree with especially what you said about momentum. This Tiger team right now, they're 2-4 in the SEC, and everybody knows SEC competition, it just means more in every single aspect. The wins mean more, the losses mean more. This is an 0-5 Mizzou team, but it is a chance for the Auburn Tigers to even up their conference record. And like you said, focusing on those glimmers of the bright spots, the positives in last week's sets. Because on Sunday, the Tigers did start out with 2-set wins, but Arkansas went on to win the last 3, and that was when they completed their sweep of the Tigers. And so this weekend, I think, like you mentioned, Rebecca Raff, she's the first Auburn player to ever get SEC Offensive Player of the Week twice in one season. She's only a junior, so she can only go up from here, and she's going to look to continue to build upon that performance. Like you said, Bella Rosenthal, 20 digs over the last weekend, and 5 other Tigers had double-digit digs. You mentioned Tatum Shipes, Yavuz, they both have been staying very strong at the net, and this is the first full regular season under head coach Brent Crouch after last year's COVID season where things weren't as they usually are. And I think that if the Tigers continue to focus on the positives and build upon those, just like you were saying, I think that they have a real chance to build that momentum ahead of the rest of SEC play, especially against this Mizzou team. And they're going to be looking to put up a fight because this Mizzou team, they realize they're 0-5. They want to get that win, especially against an Auburn team that's still in the process of rebuilding. So I think it'll be a good weekend, but I think the Tigers can definitely use this to their advantage. And that first match will start Saturday at 4:30. Next up, we have soccer. The Auburn soccer team won last weekend in overtime against LSU 1-0, and on Sunday they returned to the pitch to host the University of Florida Gators. Andrew, this is a big SEC matchup. It's going to be televised on ESPNU, which really just shows how intense of a matchup it's going to be. What are you most excited about to see after last weekend's wins from the Tigers?
I'm excited to see the Auburn offense play. A couple of close games this weekend against Mississippi State and LSU. Helps them climb up the ladder again. Wins are so important in the SEC. But, they've been scraping by wins, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but beforehand, the Auburn Tigers used to score 2-3 goals a game. That we saw that offensive firepower in games prior. This could be because we're getting to the home stretch of the SEC season, which means tougher teams. Teams are worn out. Players are worn out, so things get more complicated to score. They know how to play defense better than weeks prior. But really looking to see the connections between Anna Haddock, Marissa Arias. Marissa Arias has been really good so far. Currently tied with the most goals in the SEC so far. She has 6 goals on the season, and the combination on the offense is really just immaculate. You have so many good offensive players. Anna Haddock can score from anywhere really. We've seen that all season. You have Marissa Arias, pretty mentioned. You have Grace Copeland, Olivia Candolino, Carly Thatcher, the freshman. She scored 3 goals in one game, so anyone on this team can score. It doesn't really matter if you're a freshman or a senior. Everyone can contribute equally to this team. Defensively as well, Alyssa Melanson, which assisted the goal against LSU. She's a defensive player, but she plays up. She can go up and down the field, which is really important. And you need those type of players heading through the SEC stretch. And a win against UF, they're 2-3-1 in SEC play. It's a very beatable team, and they need that win because the next few weeks, if you look ahead in their schedule, they have to play Arkansas and Ole Miss, two really good SEC West teams, and they have to finish out playing SEC play in Alabama in Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl. So getting those wins and grab momentum will be crucial for this team.
Yes, you mentioned that momentum, and offensively, this Tiger team, like you said, it was a huge talking point right ahead of conference play. Everybody on this team has been scoring and contributing in their own ways. You mentioned Marissa Arias. She has gotten 4 goals so far on the team, just in SEC play. That's a team high, and she was very strong in her performance in the win over LSU. Last weekend, the Tigers had 2 West wins, 2 1-0 wins, both shutouts. And I think that speaks a lot about the team's overall character and their leadership. And Coach Karen Hoppe, she always talks about how pleased she is with the Tigers' performance. There's always those little mistakes that can go back and be fixed, but so far, every game so far, this is a scrappy team. They found a way to win, and more than likely, each game they've improved upon what's been pointed out in the previous match. And I think defensively this weekend, the teams look pretty even, especially record-wise. They both played Mississippi State with the same outcome. They both played Tennessee with the same win-loss outcome. And so I think that it's going to be a really great matchup this weekend, definitely one of the top ones to watch just for Southeastern Conference soccer throughout the weekend. But defensively, if the Tigers can just build upon each other, you mentioned Melanson. I think whether it's from Melanson to Prohaska, just moving the ball up the field and building off each other's saves and momentum. And on top of that, offensively, we talked about that, how important that is. But the keys to this game, easier said than done, but I think they're going to be controlling the ball and keeping the momentum in their favor in that sense. But on top of that, pressuring whenever the Florida Gators have the ball, because that defense, we keep going back to it. They really have earned their role this season and just continue to build upon that. And Maddie Prohaska, she's back as a sophomore, and she's had a very impressive play so far, building off of her successful freshman season. And so I think defensively, if the Tigers can continue to keep the ball under their control and just playing with that clock, I think there's a really good chance they're going to walk away from this weekend with yet another win. But I think it will be a close game and definitely one to watch. That will air on ESPNU at noon on Sunday. Our last Auburn sport of the weekend is football. Last weekend, the Tigers hosted the 126th meetup of the Deep South's oldest rivalry, falling to the now-ranked #1 Georgia Bulldogs 34-10. Andrew, what did you see last weekend that the Tigers can apply in their matchup this weekend as they travel to Fayetteville to take on the Razorbacks?
Well, the Tigers started off really good on offense in their first drive, making quick first downs, running the ball effectively, and that stalled out as the game progressed. Georgia has arguably the best defense in the country right now. It's really just crazy to think how good they are. But, as the game progressed, many catches were not made, and that has to be fixed. Coach Harsin mentioned that in his press release, that we just have to concentrate more and we have to focus on catching the ball, and they're working on that in practice this week, and that's going to be crucial heading into this Arkansas game. A few other things I saw from the Georgia game was the defense actually, it played pretty well. It had some stopped Georgia in some crucial third and downs, or third down drives, sorry. And and that's going to be crucial because Arkansas is can run and pass the ball. If we want to come out with a win against Arkansas, we're going to have to be able to stop both areas of attack. So definitely saw a bit of improvement from the defense, which is also really good to see. And, really excited for this game against Arkansas. It's going to be a fun one.
It should be a fun one. I think it will come down to the question of, is Arkansas really back? People ask this every year, and it looks like this could be the year. So I think the Tigers are definitely going to have a run for their money. But if you take a look at last week's performance, like you said, the Tigers started strong. They had a 17-play opening drive, and they ended with a field goal. And that failure to advance that into a touchdown in the red zone is very frustrating as someone who follows Auburn football so closely. And I think it's very hard when the Tigers don't live up to their own expectations, because after the game, Brian Harsin was talking about how They believed that they could win, and they went out there and they didn't do that. And so I think it's hard because this Tiger team, under a brand new head coach, there's a lot that has to be rebuilt and new foundations that have to be established, and especially against, obviously, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. That is a huge game. People who, a lot of Auburn fans are from Georgia, and so everything just means more revolving that game. And so that's why I think the loss stung so much to the fans and everybody else watching. But I think that hopefully it stung just as much for the players, if not more, because Auburn could have won that game. Yes, that was now the number one team in the nation, but they held them in check. Like you said, the defense, they played pretty well in terms of quarterbacks. Bo Nix, he's getting the distance. He just needs to work on accuracy. Same for TJ Finley. And Bo will probably start against the Razorbacks, but TJ might go in there depending on how things progress. And defensively, I was impressed with the performance of Zion Puckett. And offensively, Demetrius Robertson against his former team, he played really well. And if he can continue to be a leader among the receivers, like you said, the receivers have been having some problems, but all it takes is just a couple guys who the other receivers can look up to. And just on the team in general, I think that building off that momentum, and you got to hope as an Auburn fan that the team is going to build upon last week's loss, because they could have won. It could have been much closer. Georgia came in and walked all over the Tigers. And on top of that, just the fact that Harsin said that they didn't live up to their own expectations, hearing that from your new head coach, that's got to hurt. And so all I can hope is that this next weekend is just a game full of problems that will fixes to last week's problems, and hopefully they can just kind of get back in the right mindset ahead of the bye week, because the bye week, if they go in with 2 losses, then there's going to be a lot more to fix, and it's going to be less enjoyable for the Tigers in terms of practice. And so I think that in terms of this weekend, they're just going to have to play their own game. I think Arkansas is only a 3-point favorite, and that's really just home team advantage. And so if the Tigers can push that out of their minds, just focus on themselves, I think that they should be able to beat Arkansas pretty easily. I mean, this team just got walked all over by Ole Miss. They allowed over 600 yards of offense, and Arkansas's got to be reeling from that. And so if the Tigers can take advantage of that weakness, build upon their own frustrations, I think that they have a really good chance of walking out with a solid win. Andrew, who's your player to watch this weekend?
My player to watch this weekend is Derek Hall on the defensive line. You know, I think for Auburn, one of the keys for this game, I think, will be the defense. If we can stop Arkansas's run and pass game, that will, limit Arkansas to make, if we could stop the run game, they will have to throw the ball, and that forces the QB to could possibly make some mistakes, some errors. Our secondary, hasn't been as good, but I feel like if this is a game where they come back, it's this game, making those, reading the QB's eyes and, trying to pick the ball up. I think that's going to be really important for this game. Obviously, I'm not too worried about the offense. Ole Miss scored 52 points on them, so, I think we have the potential to score on offense. Fixing those receiver issues, I think, will be important. But I think as long as the defense, and especially Derek Hall, if he can really make an impact on the defensive line, breaking the tackles from the offensive line and getting to the QB and just forcing him to throw the ball, I think that will be especially important for if the Tigers want to win on Saturday.
I agree. Derek Hall, key leader on defense for the Tigers. Defense is obviously going to be key this weekend against this sharp Arkansas attack. But offensively, I'm going to have to look at John Samuel Schenker. He is senior leader on the team. He's been doing really well with receiving, one of the top receivers on the team right now. And he had his best game of the season against LSU. Last weekend, he only had 1 reception against UGA. And I think that just coming out of Death Valley, everybody was riding high on that momentum. I think this weekend, after being beat so badly against the Bulldogs, he's going to be looking to just continue to prove his place along the successful offense. And so I think that he is really going to be looking to make a name for himself once again and just build upon his performance 2 weeks ago against the rival Tigers. For our final segment of the week, we have our pick'ems. This weekend, all of our matches will take place in the SEC. First up, we have LSU and Florida. Who do you have?
I have LSU. I could definitely see, LSU upsetting Florida. If Texas A&M can upset Alabama, why can't LSU do the same? LSU will be very hungry. Ed Orgeron needs a win. After suffering back-to-back losses against Auburn and Kentucky, he needs a win desperately. And what better win than beating his rival in Florida?
Yeah, you mentioned Coach O on the hot seat, and I think that's going to make this a much more exciting game than it would be otherwise. I'm going to have to go with Florida in this. I know that LSU will be at home. They will have that home field advantage at Death Valley. But LSU is 0-3 when they allow over 115 rushing yards, and they're 3-0 when they allow less. So all eyes this weekend are going to be on Florida's rushing game, and I think that they're just pretty much unstoppable in that area. LSU's defense, as we saw up close and personally when they played Auburn, has kind of been struggling. And so I think that Florida's going to get this win in Louisiana. Next up, we have Ole Miss Tennessee. Who do you have?
I have Tennessee winning this game. It's the SEC. It's October. Anything can happen now. And I think Tennessee's been playing really good football. If you haven't watched Tennessee, I highly encourage. They put 40 points on Missouri at the first half. They scored like 35 points against South Carolina in the first half. So this Tennessee offense has definitely changed and has definitely been improved under Josh Heupel. Yes, Ole Miss has a really good offense, but they have to go travel up to Knoxville, and playing in Knoxville is a very, very hostile environment. If the fans can get in it and mess around with Matt Corral and his calls, I think Tennessee might come out with a win.
Yeah, if you're a Tennessee fan, you've got to be really happy with how this season is progressing so far. But I'm going to have to go with the Rebels in this. Even though they are at the home field disadvantage, I think that their offense, like we mentioned before, over 600 yards against Arkansas, 52 points. Matt Corral is still in Heisman contention, been playing very impressively. And I just think this is going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be a very high-scoring game. And I think it's definitely one of the matches to watch. I'm going to have to go with Ole Miss, but I'll definitely be tuning in. And I have no doubt that the Vols are going to keep it really close. Should be a good game to watch. Next up, we have Mississippi State, Alabama. Who do you have?
Alabama for sure. Alabama's really hungry to get back on the winning streak. After losing, they snapped a 100-game winning streak to unranked opponents. So Alabama definitely, they got pretty beat up in practice. Nick Saban was not too happy with that result. So, the players are going to play with fire under them, and they're going to go out there, they're going to have to go beat Mississippi State. So I have the Tide on this game.
If everybody looks at last weekend, I think most people are going to agree it was a glitch. Alabama, they lost, but only 2 of Saban's 6 national championships have been with an undefeated team. And the last time Alabama lost back-to-back regular season games was 2007, and I don't think the Tide is trying to repeat that history. The Tides' offense is very successful still. Bryce Young, they still put up so many points against the Aggies. And Mississippi State, they're going to try that air raid attack, but I think Alabama's defense is strong enough to hold them off. And they may keep it exciting early on, but I think the Tide is going to pull away for a pretty clear win with this one. Next up, we have College Game Day's matchup of the week, Georgia versus Kentucky. Who do you have?
I have Georgia on this one. I just don't see a way where Kentucky comes into Athens and beats Georgia, especially with Georgia's defense being one of the best in the nation. I think, Kentucky, might make it close in the first half, but I definitely think Georgia will run away with it in the second half. I just think Georgia's defense is too much for Kentucky's offense.
Call it wishful thinking, but I'm going to go with the Wildcats for the upset. Sanford Stadium, the energy, the intensity, it's going to be insane. But I think that the Wildcats, they have a really talented running back in Chris Rodriguez, and their offensive line has been doing their job. And I think that as long as they can control the ball, keep the momentum in their favor, avoid those turnovers, they're really good at avoiding the penalties. And if they can just force those takeaways, I think that they have a chance to give the Bulldogs run for their money. I think at the end of the day, it's not going to be the Wildcats beating themselves. And so that's why I'm hopeful that the Wildcats will get the win. Both teams are 6-0, but they're completely different caliber. But I'm hoping that Kentucky can make a statement and cause that upset against the Georgia Bulldogs. For our final matchup of the week, we have Auburn versus Arkansas. Who do you have?
I have Auburn on this one. Auburn's definitely going to want to play under fire under their belt after losing to the rival in UGA. And this is a huge bounce-back win if they're able to complete this because, after playing Georgia, most of the games are winnable before heading to the Alabama game. So if they can somehow win out, I know it's a very struggling task. They have a shot to, head to the Alabama game for a shot to win the SEC West. So I think Auburn will definitely make this really competitive. I think their offense will show out. They will fix their receiver problems. And, Auburn will be on the winning streak again.
Yeah, both of these teams are coming into this game with one loss. And that's their streak right now. And so I think that they're both going to be looking to bounce back and get that win. And I'm going to have to go with Auburn, but I think that it means a lot for both teams, especially Auburn, because they're still playing. Right now, it's mostly about bowl game bids. And yes, you mentioned there's a chance that they could upset Alabama for the SEC West. But right now, this win will hinge the rest of the season. And like you said, it's a big say to go just with 3 losses if they lose Penn State, UGA, and then Alabama. But I think it's possible under Harsin, especially if this team turns around and just plays insane. And Arkansas is going to be looking to prove that they're back. Tigers are going to be looking to prove that they could have and should have beat Georgia. And I think it's definitely going to be a good game. But I have to go with the Tigers on this pick. That's all we have for you this weekend. For more news and sports updates, head to our website at eagleeyeauburn.com or our Twitter at EETV_sports. I'm Delaney Barrow, joined by Andrew Meza. Have a good weekend and War Eagle.